Hello and welcome to Soulpreneur Stories, our little corner of the internet where we put the spotlight on one of our members. And today I have the pleasure to be speaking to Viv. And apart from saying I have experienced Viv's services and they are amazing, so you must listen, I'm not going to say anything else. I'm going to let Viv introduce herself. So Viv, say hello and tell us a little bit, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Viv Chamberlain Kidd. The services that Sharyn was talking about is I've helped her with some stuff with essential oils, and then we've done some shamanic healing together, which has been awesome. So I run a little business called Essentially Shamanic because I really didn't know what to call it because my name's a bit of a nightmare, a bit of a mouthful, and people don't know how to spell it. So I thought when I got into the essential oils, having already trained as a shamanic practitioner, I thought putting those two together worked really well because I believe I am essentially shamanic, but it also brings in the essential oils that I use as part of my shamanic practice, but also for all things mental, emotional, and physical. So that's a bit about what I do. I'm a core shamanic practitioner who uses essential oils.
So the shamanism came first from that little preamble. So tell me how, or tell us, how did you stumble across, find, get into shamanism?
Interesting story. So when I first had my children, both my husband and I decided we didn't really want them to go to school, which is a bit of a weird thing, but just because of the way we were bringing them up. And it soon became clear to me that although my kids were autonomously educated, which means I didn't teach them anything because I didn't want to mix up being a mum and a teacher, that I had some anger issues around my own childhood. I think some parents might understand this, that your kids reflect back to you some of the things. They seem to be able to push your buttons in things that maybe you haven't dealt with from your own childhood. And so when my kids were quite young, I ended up going on a thing called the Hoffman process, which is a 7-day intensive look at unpacking things that you've inherited from your parents that you don't want, or things that you rebelled against, patterns that they've got. So it's all about clearing patterns. And one of the things I loved on there, which was especially good for me, was they deal with what they call the quadrinity. So you've got a physical body, you've got your intelligence, your emotions, and then your spiritual side. And I discovered quite soon into that process that I'm quite a thinker, but I'd spent a lot of time in my brain, probably because as a child nobody had realized that I was dyslexic, and I'm probably got other issues but they've never been diagnosed. But I was diagnosed dyslexic when I was just finishing my degree, annoyingly. So I spent a lot of time in my head sort of ignoring my physical body. I'd been brought up a Christian, so I had a spiritual side, but I'd lapsed because of issues I have with sort of hierarchical things like that. So it was quite interesting to see how I was neglecting my body, how I wasn't honoring my spiritual side. And that sort of led me to, what am I going to do about those two things? And so I went and found shamanism, weirdly enough, because it's not a religion, so there's no hierarchical thing. It's all about self-empowerment, very much sort of about your own autonomy with you and your spirits. And I also found some ways to honor my physical side, and actually that works really well with the essential oils as well. So, but yeah, that it all came from there, weirdly enough.
So quadrinity, I mean, I love that because part of my thing is that we are whole beings.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversations that people have about you must be heart-centered, and your mind is something to be controlled, the monkey mind is something to be controlled, or in the academic circles where it's all very mind, not very heart, what about the gut instinct? And of course, yes, our physical body. So I love that. I'm going to have to remember that quadrinity.
Yes. And I mean, it fits really well with some of the stuff I do in my shamanic work as well. So I'm quite a logical being. So before having children, I worked in information technology. So weirdly enough, I've got a philosophy degree, which is actually very logical based. And then I went on to do a master's in IT and got a job in database programming. And then I have children, and obviously home educated the children. But a lot of the stuff I do around my shamanic work is around sort of the directions, north, south, east, west directions, and then the four elements: water, fire, air, and earth, that fits with that. And I've sort of linked that to the quadrinity. So I've got a little compass that sort of guides me to remind me I am the boss of my body. I can be the hero of my health, which is sort of my mental health. I'm the emperor of my emotions, but I'm also the sovereign of my soul. So to remind myself, if I'm getting too stuck in my head and like over analyzing everything, maybe go and have a bit of a dance, or maybe get an oil out and have a bit of a sniff of an oil, because that's going to tap into your brain, but just let you be a bit more free. Or if I'm stuck on sort of just being all journeying, talking to my spirits, I'll get to that point and go, right, no, I really need to ground, or how are my emotions feeling? So it's a really good reminder with the compass, or all the elements, because they sort of, water is west and fire is south, depending on where you're in the world. That sort of having that compass helps me sort of ground myself, or go where I need to go depending on what's going on in my life. So yeah, I totally agree. Sometimes we're too here and sometimes we're not enough here, but we are a multi-aspect being. It's not all one or the other. So
I just can't see, and the appendix always gets me on this logic, but I can't see why there would be any part of us in any kind of dimension. So, whether we're talking the physical or whether we're talking we're talking dimensionally, I don't understand why there would be part of us that didn't have value. You look around in the earth, in the kind of the way the universe is set up, and absolutely everything has a value.
yeah, even when people think it doesn't. So you look at weeds in the garden, and it's like a lot of the weeds are like your nitrogen fixers, which means the rest of your garden can look amazing. So when you're getting rid of those dandelions or whatever, it's like, just be, or clover, or that sort of thing. Just be a bit careful, because you're not sure. You might not always be sure how those things all fit together in the bigger ecosystem, whether that be out there, or whether that be in us. So I definitely know from doing like the Hoffman process and then finding my way into train as a core shamanic practitioner, that I'm a lot more peaceful and grounded and stuff, because I've begun to realize when I'm feeling down, I need to move my body, which is something you wouldn't think would have come from shamanism. But actually, you do a lot of drumming. When I'm journeying, I quite often can go on journeys and I'm using my body in non-ordinary reality, which is what they call it when you're going off and talking to your spirits. I've got whole landscapes out there where I can go. I can do things that I can't do in York, because I don't have the sea just there, or I don't have massive mountains because I live in York and it's flat. So I can be using my body and my mind and still be aware of those dynamics and stuff. So yeah, you've got to look at the whole aspects of stuff.
That's actually a really interesting one as well, isn't it? That your body doesn't necessarily know the difference between when you're thinking it and when you're experiencing it. So you can have a physical response or a physical reaction to that journey to the sea, and in fact, you haven't left your chair.
No. And it was something I did with a friend, because I wanted to know what happens when I go on a journey. And I did a little video about it. She put electrodes on me, and we did 15 minutes of what she'd normally do with clients, because she does this as part of her business. And then we did 15 minutes where she said, right, go and journey, and I'm going to see what your brain does. And she said my brain waves were totally different when I was journeying, because I was off doing a whole load of things. And that's what happens in dreams as well, which is why I love dream work, because you can go off and experience stuff and you're just lying in your bed, but it's showing you all these things from your mind and your emotions, and even diagnostically about your body. It's showing you things that if you stopped and intuitively tapped into it, maybe listened to your gut and your heart a bit more and took the time, those things would come out. And when they don't, because we're busy rushing around all the time, they might come out in dreams. That's why I love doing the dream work I'm now doing as well, because it's another really good way to tap into, what's going on? Like, is there something I should know? So it's all really fascinating.
It is completely fascinating, isn't it? And I love the whole mix of the things that you've brought in. So the philosophy degree, the IT career, the parenting, which you are absolutely right, is just mirror after mirror after mirror, isn't it? And then on and into your healing journey. And I
Yeah.
know actually that I know from knowing you that what you're passionate about is the empowerment side of that as opposed to enabling.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's why I autonomously educated my children. So I did nothing with them. So even though I taught other people's kids philosophy, maths, and IT, because those are sort of big passions of mine, I didn't do any of that with my children because I didn't want to muddy the water between I'm their parent or their mum or whatever and their teacher. And also, anytime I tried, I just ended up being really mean. So it's not a good thing. It sort of led me towards doing the Hoffman actually. So I wanted them to find their own passions and find their own path. And I've got two children from the same people, me and my husband, and they're very, very different. So obviously they've got similarities, but they're very different personalities and they push very different buttons in me. But I wanted them to be able to find, decide what they want to do, when they want to eat, when to follow when they're hungry, when do they want to sleep, what passions do they want to pursue, all within the boundaries of sort of unconditional love. So I'm a shamanic practitioner and I truly believe that's something that's really important to me because I changed so much during that training, which is why, even though I was doing it for me, I now have to share it with other people. My kids have got power animals because I got them for them. I don't know if they do anything with them because it's none of my business.
Yes.
It's something I can show them, but I'm not going to dictate to them that they have to be like me. My husband's much more go to the woods. That's where he honors his spiritual side. He doesn't dictate that they have to do that. So it's all about people finding their own way of doing stuff and all finding their own way to be empowered. And that's my biggest thing. All of us are a miracle. The likelihood that you were born is miraculous. And therefore, you've just got to realize how amazing you are. And if I can be part of that journey and help you tap into that with doing some shamanic work or helping you with essential oils, because they're a really good way to tap into your emotions and deal with what's coming up, especially in this busy world, that you can just pick up a bottle, smell it, and you're going to feel better, and deal with your own physical health that way as well, so you don't have to rely on the National Health Service as it's struggling at the moment or whatever. Then that's what I want to do, because I want everybody to be their fantastic, amazing, wonderful selves, because we've just got amazing things that we can bring to the world and share with each other.
And yeah, and I think that is the kind of the thing about it that we are missing somehow, in that we're not all the same. So when I want to go to sleep or when I want to eat may not be may not work may not be the same time as other people, and yet we are trained to work from 9 till 5 or 9 to 9 like I did. And actually, morning times are I wake up in winter. This is what I now know. I wake up in winter, so I follow the seasons, and I'm a very slow waker. By mid-morning, by spring, I'm about ready to be put out to the world. But I'm certainly not one to dive out of bed at 5 a.m. and have done 2 hours worth of work before the rest of the world has woken up. But we're taught that as a soulpreneur, as an entrepreneur, that's how entrepreneurs win, by getting up at 5 a.m. and doing 2 hours of power work before the rest of the world's woken up. It was like trying to do that it was just so difficult. I do not work best at that time of the morning. And
No.
giving myself permission to say, do you know what, Sharyn? Don't work before 11 unless you're inspired to, because you're not very good at it. Stop it.
Yeah. And that's the empowerment side of it, tapping into your own power and going, right, what am I going to do? And not all people can do that. If you've got a 9 to 5 job, you have to be there at 9. That's fine. But there's ways that you can trick yourself into doing that are a lot more simple than people sort of make out. So it's finding those little tips and tricks that work for people. If you're somebody who's away with the fairies, which really annoys me, there's nothing wrong with fairies, but you know what I mean, who's always out here, finding ways to be grounded when you need to, that can be really useful. But it doesn't mean you need to do it all the time. We need those people who are out here thinking outside the box and doing that crazy stuff. That's really important. That creativity is really important. But we also need people who are grounded, who remind you, actually, whilst you're up here, you still do need to eat and drink and sleep, because actually you're going to collapse in a small heap. So we all have, everybody has skills, everybody has insights, everybody has things that are important for us all to be listening to. So the idea that we all have to be the same, that's one that I really struggle with, because somebody may want it, I don't know why, but we're not all the same. We're all amazing, and we're all the only thing we've got in common is that the fact that we're on this planet is an absolute miracle. If you look at the maths of it, it's crazy that you're here. So make the most of it, be the best you can, whatever the way that it doesn't have to be shamanism, it doesn't have to be essential oils, it doesn't have to be soul work, but whatever it is, if people like you and me can help people be that, then let's do it, because you want to be the best, everything, whatever it is you're doing, be the best and have good fun doing it.
And actually that thing, I'm going to ask you to say it again because I've forgotten already, but the quadrinity,
yeah.
Quadrinity, I'm getting the word, but that quadrinity is really important, because it takes, in whatever way works for you, but it takes all the different elements that make us human and asks us to honor all four of those 4 quadrants.
And it's really interesting when I do soul retrievals or shamanic healing with people, I quite often give people an integration ceremony. So if you've lost a bit of yourself through like a car accident or repeated illness or bullying, or you just feel like something's happened, or you had a broken relationship and you feel that you haven't been quite the same, in shamanic terms, that would be like having a soul retrieval or a power retrieval that will bring that bit of you back. And I send people off with integration ceremonies, and quite often it's interesting how many of those integration ceremonies are actually around moving your body. Because if you think stuff that happened to you like before the age that you had language, or had language enough to understand what you were saying, which is normally around the age of about 7, psychologically speaking, that we've got all these emotions in our bodies and we're trying to think our way out of it, or spirit our way out of it, and it's just not going to work, because sometimes you just need to move. So it's really important. We are physical beings, and changing your physiology it's such a quick and simple thing to do, to change how you feel, whether that be smelling an oil, or just doing the power pose, or do a bit of dancing, a bit of drumming, go and put your feet on the earth and remember how amazing the earth is, because it does all this stuff without worrying about it, whereas we're all like stressing and worrying and doing and the trees are just like, yay, look at the sun, it's awesome. Like, go and be like a tree for a bit. It's
be
cool.
More tree. I love that.
Be more tree. So yeah, it was a good thing to learn. My poor little brain was going, you've got a body, you've got emotions, you've got a spirit, do something about it. Like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Can you imagine if we, and you did, but can you imagine if we schooled our children like that?
Well, yeah.
Aware, and I know you did, but as a child and as a mum, had I understood that, my experience of life would have been far different to the way that it was.
I once developed my own sort of vague curriculum, because when you say to people you don't do anything with your kids, they look at you quite shocked, as you can imagine. And quite a few of my family are teachers, so they definitely were like, what? You're not going to teach them to read? What are they going to do? Sort of thing. But I mean, some of my math lessons, I used to do things like, we would go outside and I would be showing them how to measure a tree without measuring a tree, like, because it was too tall and these were small kids. And I once like measured a tree based on the height of one of the kids in the class. So it's like, how many Josephs do you think that tree is? And then, showed them how they could do it based on where the sun was and blah, blah, blah. And that was them moving their bodies. So they're way more likely to understand it, because firstly, it's funny. Like
Yeah.
how many Josephs is that tree? How many Josephs is that? Like how many Josephs fit into a Zach? You know, so firstly, it's fun, but secondly, they're going to remember it. But it also has proper applications. And I sometimes think when you're all up here and you're not finding the soul, I mean, maths is a soul-filled subject. When you look at it, like the sacred geometry and
Sacred
the way
geometry is
plants
amazing,
grow, and
isn't it?
yeah, and we distill it into this thing that actually is really quite often boring, unless you like maths, which I did. So I loved maths. So you could do any maths with me and I'd be like, whoa. But you know, we can make it really dry and boring, and then you're sitting there and it's all up here, and you've lost those other elements that need to be in there to spark that passion, or at least make it interesting enough that you can get through your GCSE and then forget about it. But I mean, maths is so beautiful, and we've made it into this thing.
Yeah.
You know, I get a bit on my high horse about maths because I really love it.
Viv,
Same with IT.
I'd be very happy for you to stay on your high horse and for us to keep chatting, but I am going to have to bring this to a close and simply say to those listening and stroke watching, if you have enjoyed listening to Viv and her soulpreneur story, she comes highly recommended from me, both for her essential oils and her shamanic practitioner work. Do get in touch. All of her details will be down here, and I'm pointing downwards because they will be in the comments section somewhere. And if you would like to share your soulpreneur story, which literally is like this, we sit down and we have a chat. It is that simple. Then there should be a message button up there, and it would be great if you would drop me a message, and I will send you a link to my calendar and we can have a chat. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much, Viv, for sharing your story with us.